Most people believe that staying in their home during retirement is the financially safe choice. Now, why is that? It feels conservative. It feels responsible. It feels like an almost obvious choice, right? I already own the house. You know the neighborhood, the costs associated with the house, they feel familiar. So the sentence sounds settled. You know what? We'll just stay. But there's a problem. That sentence, it isn't a conclusion. You're actually making an assumption. And for a lot of retirees, it quietly becomes the most expensive assumption in their entire retirement plan. Not so immediately, not dramatically in some explosive fashion, but later on, when your flexibility in retirement is gone and your choice and options narrow really dramatically. So this video, it isn't about downsizing. It's not about moving. And it's not about telling you what to do. It's about why that phrase, staying put, saves money, often stops being true when it's the most important to you. So if this way of what we're doing here, looking at retirement, is useful to you, subscribing just make sure you don't miss the next assumption that we're going to pressure test. So if this were risky, it wouldn't feel so calm as we think about relocation. Staying in your home feels financially conservative. Why? The costs are familiar. Your mortgage, now maybe it's gone. You may have paid it off. Congratulations. Taxes, that's a different video, right? They're predictable. Utilities, you know what you're paying for utilities month in and month out. Your unknown costs always feel larger than known ones. And that's why this belief, right? It survives all the attention and scrutiny from your financial planner, your attorney, your CPA, yourselves. It's not because it's cheaper. It's because it's so emotionally anchored in our lives. And this isn't just you, right? It's not just anecdotal. So groups like the AARP, through their home and community preferences research, have consistently shown that people want to stay in their homes. Now, why? Partly because the costs, they feel familiar. Even when those same people later on, when they get the research, they report being surprised by how expensive staying in that home actually becomes. You aren't comparing two real options. You're comparing certainty to uncertainty. That's not math. That's just comfort. So familiar, it doesn't mean cheaper. It means harder to question. People rarely add up the full cost of staying in your existing home. Why? Because we normalize maintenance, insurance, utilities, property taxes. Now, it's not because you ignore them, right? It's just because an expense, you already know them, you've already accepted them as a normal, regular part of your life. Meanwhile, alternative housing, right? Something new. It's vague, right? It's inflated. It's emotionally loaded. So when people say moving would cost more, what they often mean is moving would just feel riskier to me. And that comparison is never fair. You see, housing costs, they don't rise evenly, predictably. They arrive late. Most retirement planning assumes that housing costs, right, they'll just drift up and to the right, just very gradually. But research from the Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies shows something really different. Housing cost pressure tends to concentrate later on in your life. When your income, right, it's fixed for many of us, it's flatter, your flexibility to adjust that income is lower, and repairs, they don't wait for readiness, right? Taxes don't pause for your age. Insurance doesn't care about your energy and stamina level. The house doesn't get expensive early. It gets expensive when change is now the hardest. Maintenance isn't optional forever, right? Early on in your home ownership, maintenance feels like deferrable, right? I can push it off as I'm paying for other things with the kids and things like that. Later, maintenance becomes a forced issue. Your roof, not going to negotiate. Plumbing, doesn't reschedule itself, your accessibility issues, they don't announce themselves just politely and quietly. Housing researchers, including some work cited by HUD, have shown that aging in place steadily converts optional upkeep into non-deferrable expense. So what do I mean by that? The house doesn't age gradually. It ages by demands. Every effort that you used to easily do on your own, right? Because you were the worker, it quietly converts over into an expense. So what used to be your physical effort becomes a paid service. Think of the things you did: yard work, cleaning, repairs, even just errands. These costs rarely get labeled as housing, but they exist because of the house. This pattern shows up again in AARP's Downsizing and Retirement Housing research, which highlights how many older adults we underestimate how much routine effort converts into an ongoing paid service over time. The housing didn't cost all of a sudden suddenly more, right? It cost a lot more. It didn't. Living in that house became much more expensive. Now, speaking of your house, many of us have equity, and quite frankly, a lot of it. Equity feels like money, right? Feels great on the balance sheet until timing matters. Home equity for many of us, it feels reassuring, but equity doesn't behave really well when money is needed monthly, when your expenses rise, right, surprisingly, unevenly. Decisions must be made quickly. So research from Fannie Mae on older homeowners, it shows that while people, they're confident about their home equity, glad they have it, they're reluctant. Why? Because they're unable to access it efficiently when, you know what, something popped up and I need the cash. It isn't that equity lacks value. That's not the case. It's that it's slow. And retirement problems are rarely patient, right? They come up immediately. So the longer you wait, the more expensive moving becomes. Again, research from AARP and Fannie Mae, they show that many older homeowners, they've made the decision, we're going to stay in our home indefinitely, even when moving would give them some extra flexibility that they're not going to have otherwise. Why? Because the house, it still works until it doesn't as you age. Moves made late, they're more expensive, they're more stressful, and more constrained. They limit your choices because usually what? They're triggered by health or some other kind of urgency, not because of your preference, not because of your choice that I'm ready to and I want to move. So waiting doesn't preserve options. Unfortunately, waiting and procrastinating, identifying the choice, it narrows your options. So it's not one big cost, right? It's not that big surprise. It's a convergence of multiple smaller costs. Staying, it doesn't fail because of one single big bill that you're presented with. It fails because your maintenance costs rise, service and those costs replace the effort that you put in, property taxes continue, right? They're onward march upward. And that equity is great, again, on the balance sheet, but it stays illiquid. You can't get to it easily. And unfortunately, a lot of times, all of that happens at the same time, and that's later on in your retirement. And usually quietly, almost unseen until it pops up. So this is where most people, as you're working through your retirement plan, this is where you ask the wrong question. The real question isn't, hey, can I afford to stay? This is the right question. Which future costs does staying quietly lock me in, and which options does staying remove? If your retirement number, your plan that you work so hard on, if you don't have visibility to that information, the math isn't wrong. It's just incomplete. Look, you don't need to decide that today, but you should know what staying commits you to later on. So this video, it wasn't about moving. It wasn't about visibility, because assumptions that feel safe early on often feel like that wet and dried cement, right? They become very rigid later. So in the next video, we're going to pressure test the assumption that when everything else tightens, right, that retirement still gives us plenty of time. We all have plenty of runway.